Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Kushag Raghuwal and very warm greetings from Law Prep Tutorial. So in today's newspaper, we have less about national news per se and more about international ones, especially and a lot of you had been inquiring about the Rwandan genocide. So we'll be doing an in-depth analysis of that on the international news page. So wait for that, and you will also get the PPT in the Google Drive, which I will be putting up on the screen. All right, so first doing with the doubts. So yesterday we discussed about how Mehul Choksi and a yellow notice was issued against him. So a lot of you are asking what are these Interpol notices, right? So there are in total of 8 notice that Interpol issues. All right, red notice or red corner notice is for those people who are wanted for one crime or the other. So Mehul Choksi, he is a wanted criminal for financial fraud. All right. Following up on that, there was another question that how could loans be issued to people without collateral? Obviously, that is what the fraud is about. And there was 2 bank officials of PNB have also been arrested for collusion of the crime along with them. All right. Then second is about green notice, warning and intelligence. That see, probably this is something that could be there. Yellow notice is for missing people. So Mehul Choksi, he was in Antigua, went missing from there. That's why a yellow notice was issued for his arrest. That this is a person who is missing. Someone should report wherever he is found. Then the orange notice is for imminent threat. Blue notice is for additional information about someone. Purple notice is modus operandi, about an organization, how they work, whatever. And black notice is for unidentified bodies. It is open to everyone who are members of Interpol to find out who this person is. And lastly, Interpol UN Security Council notice for groups and individuals subject to UNSC sanctions. So for example, sanctions have been imposed against different individuals from North Korea, Russia. So all of that, or members of the Rwandan Genocide. So in that regard, these notices are issued by, and this is mandatory for everyone to follow. All right, so the definition of each notice is also here. This is directly on the Interpol website. You can just do a Google search on Interpol notice. Then how we work. All right, there you will find notice at the right hand corner. Go to about notices. All right, and there you will find this entire link. Then moving on, another doubt that students had was about can an administrator work in more than one place in the same position as Lakshadweep and Dadar and Nagar Haveli? Yes, they can be. For example, governors are also given additional charge of different states. So there is no bar that one person can be a governor of one position. They can be given in charge. Officially, you cannot be. There has to be only one appointee for each position, but additional charge can be given. Then there was a question that there is a change in contract, like as we saw in news recently, that guarantor would be liable. So did Nirav Modi had any guarantor of him? So those are details that I am not privy to in his bank case. All right, I'm sure that those proceedings have been ongoing. I think the loans that he took, those were based on collaterals or documents of his company only. So therefore, the assets of the company has been seized, and there were close family members of him who were involved, and all of them have fled the country. They are somewhere hiding in different parts of the world. Then there was another question specifically related to what is a toolkit, or what does a toolkit mean? So a toolkit is nothing but a document listing out different assistance documents. So for example, when I make a PPT, all right, or I tell you that how do you reach to this website, if this is listed out in a document, that first type on Google interpol.int, open the first link, then go to how we work, then go to notice. So that is one explanatory toolkit. Similarly, there are toolkits telling people different mechanisms. When you're part of an organization, a toolkit is nothing but anything that assists you in any kind of work. Recently, toolkits have become politicized by one political party or the other, primarily by our central government only, that see these toolkits are basically against government. See, the content of a toolkit is what can be problematic. A toolkit in itself is not problematic, right? There can be multiple toolkits. Every organization has toolkits. And the word toolkit, where did it come from? Physical tools, right? If you have ever visited a machine garage or anywhere, repairmen have their toolkits, right? So can you fetch me my toolkit so that I can repair your car? Can you fetch me my toolkit so that I can repair this hardware material? So toolkits were there, anything assistance. Now a tool can also be misused just like any right can be. So therefore that is a toolkit. All right. So let's dive into today's newspaper. Doubts about Rwandan genocide, all of that will be cleared today. So first, the first GST Council meeting in 7-8 months took place, and the solution that the government proposed, that they are forming a group of ministers and they will decide what should be done. So after 7 months, the government decided we'll meet and then declared unilaterally a group of ministers will discuss this. A group of ministers is basically cabinet ministers of the central government only who will discuss. The government stand on this point of giving tax relief is already clear. They don't want to give it. So a group of ministers is basically delaying tactics. All of this. So this is what the decision of the GST Council has been. All right. Then apart from this, on the front page, there is nothing of real note. Supreme Court has ordered that orphaned children by COVID-19 should be identified. A database should be created and assistance to them should be provided at the earliest point of time. Apart from this, on the national news, there is one news about a person in news, which we'll be talking about. Here is an advertisement about Lakshadweep. The moment any criticism comes, advertisements also come from governments about this. All right, what steps they have taken. None of this is important for us. See, any achievements of the government in advertisements is all part of face saving. For us, the law itself becomes more important and not what has been done. All right. So therefore, this is irrelevant for us. All these political analysis of stories from one side or the other, you don't have to worry too much. So we'll move on to the editorial section. The editorial today, first one is timely windfall. What is this windfall? These are the transfers that the central bank has given to the central government. The total windfall, which is approximately around the payout is almost double 53 crore that the finance minister had budgeted. So in the budget, the government had hoped that it will receive approximately 50,000 crores from the RBI in general for its budget, but it has received approximately 98,000 crore from RBI. We discussed that the other day, which shows that, see, government's own revenue has been falling, that the businesses in India has been falling, and therefore the government already is taxing high on fuel, and then even then it still needs more money from the RBI. Now, how has RBI been able to get this money? Is through increase in exchange gain. So what is exchange gain? Let's say that you buy using your own currency, you buy foreign currency, then your currency's value increases or the value of that currency increases. So basically, profit gained or lost from that regard is what helps you make gain. So whenever we have exchange traders or exchange companies, they make money out of this exchange trade only because currency values fluctuates based on demand and supply. But there are two things that needs to be understood. First is that we follow a floating exchange rate that is based on market forces only. We determine the value of currencies. Secondly, most of the gain that RBI has transferred is something that is from this particular exchange trade only. All right. Now, the second part of it is that governments cannot rely on windfall gains from RBI. RBI is the bank of last resort to private banks and also to the government. So government relying on RBI, the last resort resource, shows the dire state of our economy that we are in. And therefore, the government should take steps to tide over this and cannot actively rely on this regard. Then secondly, in two minds, the IOC is walking on razor edge in its bid to conduct the Olympics. Rising cases of COVID-19 in Tokyo and in Japan, along with the public sentiment against the Tokyo Olympics, has now put the Olympics that were supposed to happen last year once again in a tight spot. Athletes have been concerned, qualification events have been cancelled, which led to Saina Nehwal not being able to get qualification to the Olympics. She will not be able to participate because the tournaments that she needed to clear Olympics were not held. So all of this has led to the Olympics themselves being in a tight spot. In the modern era, since 1896, thrice Olympics have not taken place. All of that was because of the world wars. That is 1916, 1940 and 1944. Two Olympic Games, that is 1980 and 1984, were blocked by Western and Eastern Bloc because of the Cold War. But this is the first time that Olympics could be threatened because of a health crisis that is there across the globe. So this is what the editorial is talking about. Then the main editorial, democracy at stake in Nepal. That KP Sharma Oli's actions has put democracy in Nepal at threat. This editorial links that more likely that KP Sharma Oli wants to become an autocratic ruler with a return to monarchical roots of Nepal. So Nepal was a monarchy. Democratic movement was led by his party only. The Communist Party, of which he is a member of, was the one who spearheaded the movement against monarchy in Nepal. And now it is his party and he himself who has been doing this. So this is an extension placing the blame on KP Sharma Oli and the president for being convoluted in taking away democratic institutions from Nepal. This is something we discussed a couple of days ago also. Then the second one, humanity matters, capitalism needs an upgrade. What is the basis of capitalist companies? That their intention is to maximize profits. So in a health crisis, what the private sector or a capitalist company has no moral ground or moral incentive to actually assist the people or even their employees. Their purpose is only to maximize profit. This editorial then calls that there is now a time for reflection on capitalism, that capitalism cannot exist sans humanity, that humans who create this capital for their shareholders need to be put in the center, and otherwise this cannot be justified. This system is bound to break at some point of time. So this is economic policy vis-a-vis capitalism. You can give it a read, but this is less important per se from CLAT perspective, but from a general reading point, you all should give this one a read. All right. Then on the other national news is what is important for us. So in the Narda scam, the Calcutta High Court has now given bail to the ministers who were arrested by the CBI. They have been given bail. So that is all that is there in the news. It's part of an update because we had discussed this. But there are two important news that we need to discuss. The last surviving member of our Constituent Assembly, the assembly that created our constitution, passed away yesterday. That is TM Kalinanam has passed away. He was a member of the Constituent Assembly and became the member at the age of 28. He passed away yesterday in his home in Tamil Nadu. He was also an MLA thrice, a former member of the first Parliament of India also, and a member of the Congress party. He had worked with B.R. Ambedkar and K. Kamraj and was a Gandhian who had participated in various movements of the freedom struggle. So we have now lost the last living connection to the Constituent Assembly, which created our constitution. And then on the right hand side is a judgment related to dowry deaths. So section 30B, which deals with dowry deaths, calls that violence or action what can be constituted as a dowry death has to happen, a violent event has to immediately precede such a demand. However, Supreme Court has now come up with a new interpretation of it. The bench headed by Justice N.V. Ramana called that, see, this kind of interpretation is absurd, that the only standard that is now required is a proximate and live link to the harassment and the death, that there should not be this standard that it has to happen soon before or immediately before. This is absurd reading, and court should interpret the section liberally to mean that, see, events preceding or after such harassment and that leading to death should be calculated or quantified as a dowry death and not just immediate actions. All right. So this is a new interpretation to section 304B. This will come handy in terms of criminal law cases in your legal section. So do give this a read. If you have any doubts, put it in the comment section. All this means is that now a more liberal interpretation will be given to the section. Events not, let's say an event took place, harassment of a wife has been taking place for past 6 months, all right? And then like every day, thoda harassment, and then finally she kills herself, or some event that leads to her death, natural death, but precursor to it has been the mental trauma. Now, will such an event be quantified as dowry death? The Supreme Court believes yes, because all of this is directly in particular to the mental trauma that she was suffering. That just because no immediate action by the family member led to the death of the wife doesn't mean it does not quantify to dowry death. That all of this is needed to curb the long-standing social evil of dowry in our country. Then moving on the other national news. So there is news, India seeks more studies on virus origin. That at the WHO meeting in Geneva, the country called for more investigation into the origins of coronavirus, that if in case it took place because of a lab escape, that should now come clear. Then Prime Minister was on visit to the 3 states and reviewed the meetings in West Bengal and Orissa, where the new cyclone had a landfall. He immediately released 500 crores for Orissa and stated 500 crores can be given to West Bengal and Jharkhand based on the report of damage. So Orissa has been immediately given relief, while the other 2 states will have to justify that this is damage that has taken place because of the cyclone, and only then money will be released. Then moving on the international news. So as we discussed yesterday also, that our external affairs minister is in USA. He met the US NSA there and members of the private sector, calling for economic recovery, which means we need more investment from US companies. Then met other private companies for supply of vaccines. And thirdly, he thanked the US government for the assistance during the second COVID wave and called for more cooperation from them to tide over the pandemic. Then Germany has apologized for a genocide in Namibia. So Western countries are now recognizing the problematic past of their own, that they are now owning up to their colonial crimes and recognizing that their forefathers or their ancestors did mistakes and they owe apology for that, and recognize that all the economic wreckage that these issues have led to, they have a role to play in recognizing them. So a genocide that took place almost a century ago in Namibia, which was a colony of Germany, is now being recognized, and that Germany will contribute $1.3 billion in developmental reconstruction work in Namibia now. Then elections took place in Syria and Bashar al-Assad won 95% of the votes. A person who has been in power in the country for a long time. Since 2011, when the civil war broke out in Syria, He and his government now controls 2/3 of the territory of Syria, and elections were held there. And he defeated his opposition, which is recognized as tolerated opposition, that whatever opposition he believes is all right for his country to have the pretense of democracy in general. So he won by 95% of the votes. But what is more important news for us is France and the Rwandan genocide. So this article links the entire history of the Rwandan genocide and what it was. So Rwandan genocide happened in 1994. It was committed by the majority community in Rwanda against the minorities there, led to 8 lakh minority ethnic Tutsis who were assassinated, massacred basically. And this is a picture of a grim reminder of the number of deaths that took place. This is just one massacre in a particular place. That happened in a particular church where people sought refuge. So religious institutions are always seen as a refuge place where during crimes people take refuge. So for example, whenever wars broke out in India, different religious institutions such as monasteries, temples, dargahs, and mosque compounds were used for people to hide. And it is therefore during this time period that this massacre, that France has now apologized for its role. So I'll be doing an in-depth analysis. There are specific facts that you all can note about this. So Rwandan genocide by the majority Hutu community against the minority Tutsis and the moderate Hutus. So those Hutus who did not want to kill them or wanted to protect the Tutsis were also assassinated or massacred. 8 lakh Tutsis and in total 10 lakh people were killed in 3 months in 1994. The president then, that is Juvenal Habyarimana, who was assassinated in a plane attack. So he was traveling in 1994. He had created the tensions and had been planning for this mass assassination for a long time. And then he himself was assassinated in a plane attack. The plane in which he was traveling was shot down and he passed away there. That led to the outbreak of violence then. He had been instrumental in suppressing the Tutsis, creating instruments to lead to situation of the genocide. The article in the Hindu lists out all those events that took place. All right. And all this time period, France was the country that had been supporting him. The French government then had been taking steps to provide military support to his government. It had also been providing general passive support for this kind of policy to take place in the first place. All right. And the church also, the Catholic Church, had played another instrumental role in the assassination of minorities that particularly took place in the churches. That is, the Archbishop then, Vincent Nassim-Guama, had played an instrumental role in the church participating in the assassination of Tutsis. So both Hutus and Tutsis are Christian communities. However, the church sided with the majority community and participated in the genocide. So next is the after effects. So first, on April 7 every year, International Day of Reflection on Rwandan Genocide, which talks about how hate can lead to such crimes from taking place. And then secondly, in June 1994, France then launched Operation Turquoise, which was a UN mandated mission for safe humanitarian areas where refugees of minorities and those of majority community also could live. The next major after effect was this, that RPF, that Rwandan Patriotic Force, then took over control of the country. It was the majority community, the moderate Hutus, who were part of RPF. They overthrew the government which had led the genocide, and since then they also they are the one who are in power. So RPF is in power in Rwanda. When they took over the government in Rwanda, the ex-government, that is of President Juvenal and his close confidants, escaped into Congo. Congo is a neighboring country of Rwanda. They escaped into Congo and had been planning regrouping there to launch a counter attack on RPF. It is because of this threat, RPF realized that we cannot let our country into further genocides, because if they come back, violence will happen once again. They launched the two Congo wars to assassinate and take final action against the exiled government of Juvenal. All right. So today Rwanda is a very poor country, a party-controlled unitary presidential republic with a bicameral parliament. So it has a system that is similar to a mix of Russia, UK, and America. It has a presidential system that is very similar to USA, wherein there is a president and there is a parliament also, just like the US has the president and the Congress. It also has a unitary government, just like United Kingdom. It does not have any federal states in it like US has. And it also, the system is similar to Russia because there is a president and there is a prime minister. So today, all of this is controlled by the Rwandan Patriotic Front. The capital of the country is Kigali. The president is Paul Kagame. He had headed the civil war to take over Rwanda from the ex-Juvenal government. And the current prime minister is Edouard Nigrante. It is a multi-ethnic government, that is majority and minority live together. It is secular, and therefore there has been some amount of peace in the country. However, it has remained very poor in general. It ranks 160th on HDI scale. So this is the Rwandan genocide, what happened then. You can read more about this in this article, gory details of how all of this was happening. If you have any doubts, feel free to put it in the comment section. Then on the economic page, that there have been surveys that COVID toll on the economy will be deep on India, that our growth and legacy of COVID-19 will carry on in our economy. There will be huge job losses in the country. Then moving on the sporting front, there is news on the World Test Championship final in which India will be participating, that in case the test ends in a draw or a tie, both the countries will be given joint winners. There has been a reserve day in case there is rain or any session is missed out because of low light or anything. The full 90 overs that are to take place on per day test match will carry forward on the reserve day. Apart from this, on the sporting news, nothing of real note. So in today's newspaper, the most important one is about the Rwandan genocide. So make sure you make your notes about that. Then secondly, the dowry death interpretation. So section 304B. All right, that will come handy in terms of legal section. Then thirdly is about the last surviving member of our Constituent Assembly. All right, so those are three important news. On editorial sections, do give the editorials a read. All right, about capitalism, about RBI windfall gains, and about Nepal's political crisis. All three are related issues for us. They will give you a brief idea of what is happening, so don't skip them. On that note, I'll conclude for the day. See you all tomorrow.